On February 2nd, 1994, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 was released. Many people were anticipating Sonic's next adventure, and it's finally here! Sonic 3 is by many people considered their favorite classic Sonic game, and to be honest, I can see why. Mini-bosses, never-before-seen zones, it's all put together really well. And since today marks Sonic 3's 30th anniversary, I decided to revisit Sonic 3 and give my thoughts on the game. This game, even to me, is one of my favorite classic Sonic games of all time, and it introduced a bunch of new concepts such as new abilities, new stage gimmicks, and even mini-bosses, which would later go on to also show up in a bunch of future classic Sonic games, such as Sonic Mania and Sonic Superstars. A lot of elements from Sonic 3 were carried over into future games, and if Sonic 3 was never made, many games such as Sonic Mania and Sonic Superstars would never be the same. Sonic 3 really did change the future of classic Sonic. Anyway, with all of that out of the way, let's review Sonic the Hedgehog 3, the first half of a masterpiece of a classic Sonic game. You boot up the game, and Sonic jumps into frame, and a big flash happens, and you're presented with the colorful and vibrant title screen. Tails is flying the tornado, meanwhile Angel Island is in the background, while Sonic is doing his little animatronic finger wag. This title screen has a lot of personality, and really welcomes the player into the adventure they're about to experience. After the title screen, the Save Select menu shows up. This is the place where you can save your progress. There are 8 save files, and you even have the option to delete save files. There's also a no save file if you want to try to beat the game without saving. This is a really cool menu. You have a picture of Sonic in the background. You can play as Sonic and Tails, Sonic alone, or even Tails alone. There's a lot to customize in this menu. Let's hop into a new save, shall we? We see a cutscene appear with Tails flying the tornado. Sonic jumps off of the tornado and transforms into Super Sonic. He starts flying over the ocean and ends up on Angel Island. But Knuckles punches out of the ground and steals the Chaos Emeralds whilst returning Sonic into his base form. And then we begin our journey on Angel Island Zone. And Angel Island definitely goes in my top 3 first Sonic zones of all time. This is a beautiful, lush jungle where you can try out a bunch of gimmicks during your first time playing through Sonic 3. There are enemies in this zone, but not too many to give the player a high difficulty spike. And Angel Island Zone also has a bunch of secrets that you can find around, such as special stages, by breaking down this wall. And now let's talk about the special stages. The special stages are primarily focused on getting a certain amount of blue spheres. Basically, there are blue spheres that you need to collect all around, and there are red spheres. If you touch a red sphere, you get warped out of the special stage, but if you manage to collect all of the blue spheres, you are rewarded with a Chaos Emerald. But you also have to be very careful when playing through these stages, because if you accidentally turn a blue sphere into a red sphere and then touch it, well, let's say you get warped out of the special stage. But don't worry, there are a bunch of special stages to find in zones, so you can always retry. After collecting a Chaos Emerald or being warped out of a special stage, you are brought back to the area where you found the giant ring, and you get to continue through the zone where you were as normal. After running up this tree, you run into an Egg Scorcher. You try to destroy it, but the Egg Scorcher manages to burn Angel Island before you can destroy it, making all the palm trees and plants in the jungle burn. Then you're in the second half of Angel Island Act 1, which is playing through the burned version of Angel Island Zone. Everything is getting burned here. There are fire sprites everywhere, even on the palm trees. And in this completely on fire version of Angel Island, you can see multiple bushes, palm trees, and plants overall burning in the background. Then you make it to this section of Angel Island, where you have to climb your way up to get into the boss arena. There is a bloomer enemy to try and stop you, but you can take it out if you're careful enough. Then, it's a rematch with the Egg Scorcher. The Egg Scorcher this time does attack by shooting flames towards Sonic and Tails. You can dodge the fire simply by jumping over it or moving away before it hits you. And if you jump at the right times, you can easily defeat this boss. And after beating the first act of any stage, a signpost falls down, and when it touches the ground, the score tally appears ending the act. But if you move the signpost by jumping to make it fly around a bit more, you can get secret items from the ground, such as invincibility and shields. I find it really cool that the developers took their time to actually add in a mechanic like this, because it's cool to actually reward yourself with a shield or invincibility or even rings before even starting the second act of a zone. And then we go into Angel Island Act 2, where we spin dash to break this rocky wall, to go through this tunnel, and actually start the act. This is, well, obviously still on fire, but this time it's more as an actual zone. There are more enemies and obstacles. You have these little rotating log pieces with spikes on them that if you use the bounce shield, you can dodge them at the right times. And I'm gonna be honest, Angel Island Zone is really climactic. I mean, when you get to the second half of Act 1, the jungle is already on fire. Not to mention the fact that Angel Island Zone is literally the first zone in Sonic 3. After climbing a waterfall in Act 2, you make it to the top of the waterfall, where you face this badnik, and you can also collect yourself a fire shield if you manage to charge up a big enough spin dash. And then you break these rocks and go through this tunnel, and then the player gets literally launched into the sky to the point where the camera can't even see them until they fall down. And then a battleship appears, launching bombs towards the player. I find this section really cool because if you keep on holding the run button, you can manage to dodge all of the bombs because they never hit you. And even though they never hit you, I find this an interesting, cool little detail because it shows Sonic is so fast that he can outrun bombs from a literal flying airship. Then you get to fight Dr. Eggman for the first time in the game. He burns down a bridge so you can't reach him anymore. But you can see him moving through a waterfall so you can know where he's going to be next. He shoots fireballs at you, but he can easily be defeated if you time your jumps right. Then a capsule shows up, and once you break it, you free all the animals, and the player has officially made it through Angel Island. Oh my god, my game crashed. After Knuckles collapses a bridge, we fall into the zone that made many name debates, Hydrocity Zone, which is a underwater city right underneath Angel Island. And I gotta admit, this zone's pretty chill. And trust me, this stage is very fast because there's boosters everywhere. The mini boss is really easy. All you gotta do is spin dash and then tap the jump button to avoid this guy. And then all you gotta do is perform a few jumps and boom, you're done. Act 2 is also really cool, but there are some areas that literally make me want to scream. Get me the hell out of here! But yeah, except certain parts of the zone, Act 2 is also really cool. You have water slides which make you go super duper fast that you can even run across water. Also, did I mention this can happen? And as we're going through Act 2, we run into Knuckles again, and again, we're staying on a bridge, and he collapses it, making us fall down into the boss arena. In the boss, Eggman uses a propeller on the bottom of his Eggmobile to pull water up when you can jump on it to be able to hit him. He also drops these metal cans that explode and shoot a water geyser, and if you manage to jump above the can and it explodes, the water geyser carries you up, letting you even hit Eggman. So yeah, the boss, thank you, is not too difficult, but more difficult than the Angel Island Eggman fight. Then, all you do is open the capsule to free the animals and strike a cool pose. And then, Hydrocity Zone is done. I wonder what next exciting zone awaits for us. You've gotta be kidding me. After Hydrocity Zone, we get blown by a water geyser into the air, and we fall down into Marble Garden Zone. A lot of people despise Marble Zone for some reason, but it's actually really good. I like the ancient ruin theme of Marble Garden. It gives some kind of vibe that no other zone gives to me for some reason. And in general, I just found Marble Garden Zone really enjoyable. Whoa, Sonic, slow down there. Marble Garden Zone exclusively features spinning tops, which you can use to ride on in midair as long as you're running on them, and it really fits with the theme of ancient ruins of a lost civilization. Marble Garden Zone's mini-boss is a drill bot. Basically, it goes up and starts drilling and multiple rocks start falling, including stalagmites, which if they manage to land or hit the player, they will deal damage. Then the drill bot comes down, and when it makes its drills go back up so they aren't down, the player has a chance to hit it and deal some damage. After 6 hits, the drill bot is defeated and Act 1 is done. Then we go to Marble Garden Zone Act 2, and after breaking this first wall, we get grabbed by a pulley. Pulleys are basically these things attached to wheels that pull you up. And after breaking another wall, we run into Dr. Eggman, and he's upgraded the Eggmobile with a drill, but unfortunately, he escapes before the player manages to defeat him. Sometimes the player can run into these human-looking faces which, after getting hit 3 times, will open up secret passageways, and the human-like sculpture will stop shooting arrows at the player. After spinning this wheel to open up this gateway, Sonic and Tails again run into Dr. Eggman, who manages to escape before getting defeated. But he starts drilling up, which starts making Marble Garden slowly collapse. And now the player is in a crush sequence. Basically, you have to make your way through Marble Garden Zone Act 2 while the stage is falling apart and you have to make sure not to get crushed. This is a very climactic section, and as you can see here in this gameplay of me, you can see that you can really get crushed if you're not fast enough, and you really gotta time your jumps perfectly to not lose a life. After you make your way through to this section, the ground will stop falling apart and you can continue the stage as normal. In the main boss of Marble Garden, Dr. Eggman uses his drill attachment to his new Eggmobile to remove the floor that the player is standing on, causing them to fall. Tails picks up Sonic, and then the entire fight takes place in the air, with the player jumping out of Tails' hands to try and hit Robotnik mid-air. I honestly like this boss because it's very interesting and a good change of pace. After doing that successfully with Tails flying, you break open the animal capsule with Tails flying to be able to free the critters, and then Marble Garden Zone is done. And then there is a small zone transition. The sun starts setting and eventually turns into night, leading us into the next zone. Carnival Night Zone is the next zone of the game, and although it looks pretty, it can be pretty annoying due to the fact that there's bumpers, springs, and balloons everywhere to try and bounce you around. In this stage there are also barrels that are used as spinning platforms, but if you're underneath one, they will most likely crush you. Time to go here, and oh my jeez! This stage also has these anti-gravity like tubes, and if it's glowing blue and you're underneath one, you get pulled up into the next area. The mini-boss is a neat concept, I'll give it that. Basically, it shoots this saw blade that makes the ground collapse that the player is standing on, and you have to insta-shield the mini-boss to make itself vulnerable to get hit by its own saw blade. Carnival Night Zone Act 2 is more of the same, but Knuckles turns off the lights in the zone, and this time there are underwater sections. The main boss is the Egg Gravitron, where Eggman drops a metal ball onto the floor, and then starts creating a magnetic pull, pulling the player towards electricity. And trust me, if you do not use the insta-shield ability, this boss is a nightmare. After beating the boss, you jump on the capsule to free the animals, and then Carnival Night Zone is done. After that, you jump into a cannon, and you get shot into Flying Battery. Wait. Flying Battery Zone got cut from the original Sonic 3 and put into the second half Sonic and Knuckles? I guess that's fine. Then we enter Ice Cap Zone, where Sonic grabs a snowboard on top of a snowy mountain and starts snowboarding. This snowboarding section exclusive to Ice Cap Zone Act 1 is a joy to play through. It is very enjoyable and it feels so alive. At the end of the section, Sonic jumps off a cliff, hits a wall, losing the snowboard, and then a small avalanche falls on him, and then you get into the main part of Ice Cap Zone Act 1, which mostly takes place inside an ice cave. This part of Ice Cap Act 1 is not as interesting as the snowboard section, but it's also nice. Sometimes during the stage you can run into an ice block which you can push, and then it slowly starts sliding down. And then it will break through ice walls that you normally can't break without it to continue the level. If you manage to dash into this swinging platform at enough speed, you can launch yourself, but it will break apart from the chain it's attached to, making you go into a completely different area you can't normally reach, and being able to exit outside. And then you face the mini-boss. The mini-boss is a robot that pulls in a bunch of frozen ice rocks, and then spins them around as a shield of its own, and then it launches them in the air for them to fall down, which is when you can hit it at its weak point when it's vulnerable and doesn't have a shield of ice rocks. After 6 hits, the mini-boss is easily defeated, and then Ice Cap Zone Act 1 is done, and the sky goes from morning to daytime. While Ice Cap Zone Act 1 did have outside sections, and did mostly take place inside, Ice Cap Act 2 is the complete opposite. It takes place mostly outside, but does have some inside sections. The speed you can gain in this act is massive. You go through this loop and enter this tunnel to go into the inside section, and then you go through another loop and then get launched off a ramp. In the main boss of Ice Cap Zone, Dr. Eggman added a freezer attachment to his Eggmobile, which shoots this cold ice gas, and if the player gets hit by it, they will get frozen and lose their rings. After Dr. Eggman's freeze attachment gets destroyed, however, he starts shooting the gas from the bottom and back of his Eggmobile, leaving the front of him as the weak spot. After he is defeated, you go and open up the capsule, and Ice Cap Zone is complete. After that, you go to the right and you spin dash through the snow to the next zone. We arrive at Launch Base Zone, the 6th and final zone of Sonic 3. Dr. Eggman is rebuilding his flying Fortress of Doom, the Death Egg, which crashed in Sonic 2, and you can even see it in the background of Launch Base Act 1. Sometimes there are doors that are closing the path for you to continue, and you need to hit a switch to open up the door. In Launch Base Zone Act 1, there are areas where you can earn a lot of speed. Basically, there are these tubes which when you go in, they launch you. We run into Dr. Eggman stealing a piece of a ground tile, but he manages to escape before we can defeat him. Then, as we are making our way through the tower, Knuckles throws a bomb, making the tower explode and collapse on itself. After the tower collapses, we go into the boss arena to fight the mini-boss. The mini-boss is a robot with 2 spike balls for hands, and it swings them around trying to hit the player. It's not too hard, but at the same time it's not easy. After that, Launch Base Act 1 is complete, and then we go back outside into Launch Base Act 2. Launch Base Act 2 is similar, but it has a bit more enemies and a bit more danger to worry about, and it also has underwater sections to go through. The main boss of Launch Base features Dr. Eggman shooting cannonballs towards the player to try and hit them. The cannonballs are not easy to dodge at all, and this boss overall is not easy compared to the other bosses. After defeating Eggman, we jump into his Eggmobile and hijack it, and then we start going through the sky. But we run into Knuckles, who is in the mood for a fight. And then he chuckles at us, but then the ground starts shaking and Knuckles falls off. We start moving with the Eggmobile, and we see everything is shaking around us, and a rocket ship in the background looks like it's moving a bit. And then as we move forward even more, we see that the rocket ship is actually getting powered, and that it's starting to fly up all the way into the sky towards space. Then we make it to a platform and we jump out of the Eggmobile that we hijacked from Eggman, and then we meet with Eggman again on another boss fight. Eggman is this time in a worm-like contraption that has laser cannons and tries to shoot down the player. It also has a small spike ball rotating to protect Eggman from getting hit. After a few hits, Eggman is defeated and there's a bunch of explosions, and then we see him flying away in his Eggmobile, making his escape. But then, the sky gets darker and darker, and then we see Eggman in a brand new attachment, the Big Arms. This is the final boss of Sonic 3. Eggman gets into his Eggmobile with larger arms as an attachment to try and grab the player, with spikes on the helmet of the attachment to make sure that the player can't hit him on top and can only hit him in between. He will move down and you have to try and hit him. if he does manage to grab you, he will slam you into the ground, making you lose rings. And after finally defeating Big Arms, it's over. Dr. Eggman is defeated, and Launch Base is complete. The Death Egg slowly starts exploding, and the rocket ship starts detaching the floor we are currently standing on where we fought Big Arms, and we start falling down, and we see that the sky isn't as dark anymore, and it's slowly getting lighter, and we see that the Death Egg is falling down, and Dr. Eggman is finally defeated once and for all.